There's something comforting about routine, you know? That little cafe on 7th had become my daily ritual. Same table by the window, same sandwich, same overly familiar barista who knew my name but never spelled it right. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic that day. Just a break from work, a quiet lunch, maybe a scroll through my messages. But life, or maybe the universe, decided to stir the pot. Because right as I was sipping my coffee, I looked up and nearly dropped the cup. Camille. I hadn't seen her in what? 6, 7 years? Her laugh hit me before the memory did. That same wild hair, that same sparkle in her eyes. A little older now, sure, but unmistakably her. I stood before I could even think, and suddenly we were in each other's arms, laughing like two college girls who'd just aced a final. God, I had missed her. We used to be inseparable, the kind of friendship that felt like family. And here she was, out of nowhere, sitting across from me like no time had passed at all. We couldn't stop talking. Every sentence was a doorway to another memory. She told me everything. Well, almost everything. Her job, the cities she'd lived in, the way she'd met the one. That's how she said it. The one. I clapped, of course. Gushed. When's the wedding? This weekend, she said, practically glowing. I grinned and leaned in. So, what's his name? Got a photo? She just laughed, a light, airy sound, and said, He's private, hates photos. You'll meet him at the altar. It sounded playful, sweet even, but something tugged at me then. Quiet, subtle. A whisper I couldn't quite hear yet. We sat there for over an hour, maybe more. Time just stopped. We laughed until my stomach hurt, gossiped about old classmates, shared stories about how different our lives turned out. And yet, sitting across from her, it didn't feel different at all. It felt like we'd just walked out of our college dorm and into this cafe like we used to. Same rhythm, same warmth. That kind of connection, it doesn't vanish. It just gets buried under grown-up stuff. But when she talked about him, her mystery fiancé, it was like watching someone flip through a book with all the important pages ripped out. She'd say things like, he grounds me, or he's not like anyone else I've ever met, but never really painted a picture. No anecdotes, no funny stories about how they met, just broad strokes, and maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just the shock of seeing her again, but something about the way she smiled when she talked about him. It felt practiced, or worse, protected. Still, I didn't push. That's not who we were. And maybe she liked the idea of surprising me, of saving the big reveal for the big day. You're coming, right? She asked, eyes wide. Of course I am, I said without hesitation. And I meant it. I hugged her goodbye feeling warm, excited, maybe even a little inspired. But as I walked back to the office, something odd lingered in my chest. Not doubt exactly, just a weight, a presence, like I had unknowingly stepped into a story I wasn't supposed to be part of. That night I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how quickly we'd slipped back into that old rhythm. It was comforting, like putting on a favorite sweater you forgot you had. But mixed in with the joy was this itch I couldn't quite scratch. I kept replaying her words, her laugh, the way she brushed off every question about her fiancé. He hates photos. He's private. Maybe that was true, or maybe it was something else. I lay in bed, phone in hand, debating whether to dig. I could have searched her name, found the wedding registry, maybe even glimpsed a photo online. But I didn't. Part of me didn't want to break the spell. Another part, the quieter, wiser part, told me I didn't have enough reason to start connecting dots that didn't exist yet. So I let it be, told myself I'd meet him soon enough. That all this wondering was just the result of too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Still, the weird feeling didn't leave me. It settled into my thoughts like fog, not blinding, but impossible to ignore. I told myself it was excitement, not unease, that maybe I was just nervous to see old friends again. But deep down, something was stirring, something I couldn't name yet. And even as I tried to quiet my mind, a small voice inside me whispered, "You should have asked more questions." The next morning felt Off. I woke up earlier than usual, even though it was Saturday and I had nowhere to be. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but that kind of silence that hums with something unspoken. Jonah had already left the day before, saying he was heading out to visit his parents for the week. I kissed him goodbye in the driveway, watched his car disappear down the street, and didn't think much of it at the time. We all need space now and then, right? Still, that weird feeling from the cafe hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it had grown louder in his absence. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, even attempted a half-hearted yoga video on YouTube, but my mind kept drifting back to Camille and her mystery groom, and that odd little pause she gave before laughing off my questions. I couldn't shake it. It was like my intuition was tapping on my shoulder, trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. At one point, I even opened our photo album, the one Jonah and I kept on the shelf above the TV. Dozens of memories stared back at me. Birthdays, weekend getaways, his arms around me at a New Year's party. He always looked the same, steady, warm, sure of himself. But now every smile felt like a question mark. I flipped the page, searching for something I didn't even know how to name. And when I didn't find it, I closed the album slowly, like it might bite if I moved too fast. By midweek, I stopped pretending I wasn't obsessing. Every little thing Camille had said echoed in my head. He grounds me. He's not on social media. He's not like anyone else. I mean, what does that even mean? I started overanalyzing texts from Jonah too. His responses were short, polite, but oddly flat. Just had lunch. Parents say hi. Miss you. I wanted to believe it was just a long trip, but there was something mechanical in the way his words landed on the screen. I stared at his messages for far too long, debating if I was spiraling. Maybe I was jealous of Camille, of her happiness. That thought hit me like a slap. No, this wasn't envy. This was instinct. A sixth sense I had learned the hard way not to ignore. Women know, don't they? We just know. Even when we don't have evidence. Even when the logic doesn't line up. It starts in the gut, then creeps into the chest. And before you know it, your whole body is carrying a question you're too afraid to ask out loud. And still, I didn't say a word. Not to Jonah. Not to Camille. Not even to my closest friend. Because once you speak a suspicion into the world, it starts to live. And I wasn't ready for it to have a heartbeat. So instead, I told myself stories. That I was tired, that Jonah was distracted, that Camille's fiancé was probably a little socially awkward. But my mind kept circling back to that wedding invitation, and something inside me whispered, "You need to go. You need to see." The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the fan clicking overhead like a metronome keeping time with my thoughts. I kept wondering what dress to wear, whether Camille would cry when she walked down the aisle, what kind of vows she'd written. But underneath those surface-level thoughts, something darker churned. A question that had no shape, just weight, like a storm you sense before it hits, even if the sky still looks clear. I got up and walked through the house in the dark, barefoot on cold tile, my fingers trailing along the kitchen counter. Everything looked the same, and yet everything felt different. I paused by the fridge where Jonah's note still hung with a magnet. Back soon. Love you. I touched the edge of the paper with my thumb. How many times had I read it without really reading it? Now, it felt hollow, as if the words had been written by a stranger pretending to be someone I trusted. When I finally crawled back into bed, I made a decision. I would go to the wedding, I would smile, I would clap, I would be the good friend Camille remembered, but I would also be watching, listening. I didn't know what I was looking for, not really, but I knew I wouldn't be able to breathe until I found it, because some part of me already knew the truth was out there, just waiting for me to recognize its face. Weddings are supposed to feel magical. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled up to the venue. A charming vineyard tucked away in the hills, all soft music, flickering candles, and the scent of eucalyptus floating through the air. The kind of place that makes you believe in fairy tales, even if only for a few hours. I wore a pale blue dress, understated, elegant, the kind that says supportive friend without screaming for attention. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. Whatever was weighing on me, I promised myself I'd leave it at the door. Inside, the place was glowing. Strings of lights draped across the ceiling like constellations. Laughter bubbled from every corner, and familiar faces, classmates I hadn't seen in years, smiled, hugged me, pulled me into conversations about jobs, kids, aging parents. I played along, nodding, laughing where it made sense, but my eyes kept drifting toward the front of the aisle, toward the place where he'd soon appear. My pulse quickened without reason, or maybe it had every reason. I just didn't want to admit it yet. Then the music changed. Everyone turned their heads. I followed instinctively, standing just like the rest, and there he was, walking down the aisle, smiling, confident, carrying a small bouquet and wearing the tuxedo I helped pick out last year for someone else's wedding. My lungs stopped working. My feet turned to stone. Because the man standing there, the one waiting for Camille, was Jonah. My Jonah. The one who was supposed to be visiting his parents. The one who had kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. For a second, I thought I might be hallucinating. My mind scrambled for logic, for explanation, for anything that didn't feel like betrayal dressed in a tuxedo. Maybe it was a twin, a cruel prank? But no, that was his walk. His exact smile, the half smirk he gave when he thought no one was watching. His eyes scanned the room, briefly, casually, until they landed on me. And for the smallest fraction of a second, they flickered. Recognition, guilt, panic. Then, nothing. He looked away. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my sides to keep them from trembling. My ears buzzed, drowning out the rest of the music, the whispers, the rustling of dresses and chairs. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I was watching two worlds collide, the one I had lived in and the one he had clearly built behind my back. And yet, no one else seemed to see the explosion. Camille was still smiling, the guests still clapped. Only I stood frozen in the wreckage. I felt like screaming, like running up the aisle and grabbing him by the collar and asking, "Who are you?" But I didn't. I stayed rooted to the floor, anchored by something colder than shock. Strategy. I wasn't going to give him the scene he probably feared. No. I would stay calm, I would watch, and I would wait. Because this wasn't over, and if he thought he'd buried the truth, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I sank into the nearest seat, still smiling faintly, or maybe grimacing. I couldn't tell anymore. My heart was pounding so loudly I wondered if people around me could hear it. My hands stayed in my lap, fingers clenched tight, like I was holding myself together piece by piece. Camille looked radiant, blissfully unaware. She beamed as she approached the altar, her dress trailing like a wave behind her. And Jonah, no, her Jonah, reached out for her hand like he meant it, like he hadn't just shattered two lives in one elegant gesture. And just like that, the ceremony began. The officiant started speaking, but I couldn't process a word. I studied them instead, the way Camille kept glancing at him, adoringly. The way he avoided looking my way, like I might somehow burn him alive with a glance. He was good at this. Too good. I wondered how long he'd been juggling us. How many lies I'd swallowed. How many weekends I thought he was with friends or traveling, when he was probably just here. Planning a future I never knew I wasn't part of. But this wasn't the moment to unravel. I needed clarity. I needed time. I needed proof. So I sat, letting the scene play out in front of me like theater. Like a drama I had unknowingly walked into, only to realize I was the final act. And as they were pronounced almost married and applause rippled through the room, I didn't clap. I watched. I memorized. I smiled. But it wasn't joy on my face. It was purpose, and it was only just beginning. After the ceremony, I slipped away. No one noticed. They were too busy hugging, sipping champagne, taking selfies under fairy lights. I found an empty hallway, leaned against a wall, and finally let myself feel everything. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak, But oddly, under all of it, there was something steadier, something cold. I wasn't going to cry, not here, not for him. I took a deep breath, wiped the corner of my eye, and stared at my own reflection in a glass door. "You're not the fool," I whispered. "He is." That's when the idea came. Simple, clean, elegant, like a ribbon tied around a secret. I marched straight to the wedding coordinator, that poor girl juggling flower arrangements and DJ requests, and smiled sweetly. "I was Camille's best friend in college," I said. "I'd love to say a few words during the reception. Surprise her." She hesitated, glanced at her clipboard, then nodded. "We can slot you in after the father's toast." Perfect. I thanked her and walked away with the calm of someone who's already seen the end of the movie. Back at the reception, I played my part. I laughed when I was supposed to, nibbled at the roasted chicken, made small talk with strangers who had no idea they were sitting beside a ticking bomb in a blue dress. I waited while the lights dimmed, while Camille twirled with her new husband, while glasses clinked and people cried happy tears. And then, at last, the microphone was offered. "Bianca?" the coordinator said. "You're up." I stood, smiled, and carried my truth straight to the center of the room. The room was warm with candlelight and tipsy joy. I cleared my throat gently, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Camille, her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkling, her hand still resting in his. I held the mic loosely, almost casually. "Hi, everyone," I began, letting my voice stay soft, almost affectionate. "I'm Bianca. Camille and I were inseparable in college, and though life took us in different directions, fate clearly had a funny way of bringing us back together." A few guests laughed politely. Jonah didn't move. "I just want to say how happy I am for you," I continued, eyes never leaving Camille's. "I mean, what are the odds? I bump into you at our favorite cafe, and you tell me you're getting married. And now here we are. But I have to admit, I was so curious about your mystery man. So curious, in fact, that I couldn't stop thinking about it all week." My voice didn't waver, not once. I smiled as I turned toward the crowd, as if I were letting them in on a private joke. Crazy coincidence, though. He looks exactly like my boyfriend. A ripple moved through the tables. Soft at first, a confused chuckle here, a raised brow there. Jonah's jaw tensed. Camille leaned forward slightly, her smile flickering like a candle in wind. "My Jonah," I said, "told me he was visiting his parents this week. Said he'd be gone the whole time. And well, I didn't want to ruin the surprise. But when I saw him walk down that aisle today," I turned to Jonah. Imagine my shock. My voice was calm, clear. And in my hand, my phone, already unlocked, resting screen up on the table beside me. I picked up the phone slowly, like I had all the time in the world. My thumb hovered over the screen as I addressed the crowd, still smiling, though it felt more like baring teeth than warmth now. Some of you might be wondering, maybe it's just someone who looks like him. That would be easier, wouldn't it? I turned the screen toward the guests at the front tables. But here's a photo of us from his birthday last month. And this one, Valentine's Day. And here's a video from last week. He's cooking us dinner and complaining about burning the pasta. The timestamps were clear. A gasp near the cake table. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Camille didn't move. Her eyes stayed glued to Jonah, like she was waiting for him to fix it. Explain it. Lie his way out of it. But Jonah just stood there, frozen, color drained, lips parted, but no sound coming out. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered every excuse. Every, "I'm just tired." Every, "Don't wait up." Every quiet deflection when I asked about the future. No, he didn't deserve pity. He deserved this moment. I wasn't going to say anything, I added, looking back at Camille. But then I remembered what love is supposed to be. Truth, safety, respect. And I realized, if I stayed quiet, I'd be helping him rob you of all that. Camille blinked just once. Her lips trembled, And then finally, she stood. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just walked out, shoulders stiff, head high, like she was holding herself together with every ounce of strength she had. Jonah called after her. She didn't stop. The room didn't know what to do with itself. It just hung there. A frozen moment between disbelief and embarrassment. No one clapped. No one laughed. Even the band stopped playing. Jonah stood in the center like a statue cracked wide open, tucks perfect, expression shattered. And me? I calmly set the microphone down, picked up my clutch, and walked past the cake, the lights, the whispers. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked like I had every right to leave. He followed me, of course. Outside, past the vineyard arches, his footsteps desperate on the gravel. "Bianca, wait," he called out, voice hoarse. I stopped but didn't turn. "Not yet. Please, just let me explain." So I did. I turned around, looked him dead in the eye, and with the quiet I'd earned, I said, "You chose this ending the moment you said you were visiting your parents." No yelling, no drama, just a truth so simple it landed harder than anything I could have screamed. He opened his mouth, searching for some version of the truth that might make him look human again. I didn't give him the chance. I walked away, leaving him standing under those string lights, surrounded by the ruins of the lie he built. I could still hear people murmuring inside, glasses clinking, the low hum of what used to be celebration. But I didn't care. I wasn't part of that story anymore. Not as the side character, not as the fool. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. A message from Camille. Just 2 words. "Thank you." No punctuation, no explanation. But I understood. She didn't need a long apology or a tearful call. She needed clarity. And now, maybe for the first time in years, she had it. I sat up in bed, the sheets tangled around my legs, and let myself breathe without weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like fresh air had finally found its way back into the room. Later that week, I heard through mutual friends that Jonah had been fired. Camille's family owned the company he worked for. Apparently, the fallout wasn't quiet. I didn't dig for details. I didn't need to. That part of the story was no longer mine to carry. What mattered was that I'd walked away with my dignity intact, and with the truth not just whispered, but heard. People asked questions, people made judgments, but I stayed silent, because peace doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be earned. There were no dramatic texts from Jonah, no surprise visits, no late-night calls begging for forgiveness. Just silence. And that silence was louder than anything he could have said. It told me he knew, not just what he'd done, but who he lost. And even though I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense, there was something deeply satisfying about the echo of his absence. Like the story had closed its own door behind me. A few days later, I found myself back at that same cafe on 7th, same table by the window, same coffee, strong, slightly bitter, just the way I like it. The place hadn't changed, but I had. There was a calm in me I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something stronger, like knowing who you are again after losing sight of it for a while. I watched the people come and go, the sunlight painting soft stripes across the table, and let the stillness wrap around me. I scrolled through my phone without urgency. No waiting for a message, no checking for updates, just photos, memories, proof that I'd loved honestly, that I'd shown up, that I'd trusted. And even though that trust had been broken, I wasn't broken. That mattered. That meant something. I sipped my coffee slowly, the warmth steadying my hands. There was no more rage, no more confusion, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had spoken my truth, in front of everyone who needed to hear it. As I stood to leave, I looked back at the table one last time. A simple moment, maybe, but one I'd remember. A moment where I didn't let betrayal define me. I defined myself. Walking out the door, I smiled. Not a dramatic, cinematic smile, just a soft one, the kind that comes from within, Not all reunions are happy, I thought, but some are necessary. And some are the beginning of something better.